Good morning or afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeremy Walsh, and I'm the Director of Support, Training, or Documentation for BNI Connect. I'd like to welcome everybody to the webinar today. Today's webinar is on the leadership team tools and reports in the system. So this is somewhat of a review of all of the different leadership team functions that are in BNI Connect, as well as a preview for anybody that may be new to their position or might be taking over a position, such as president or vice president, membership coordinator, or secretary treasurer in their chapter. So what we're going to be doing is going over things like how do we enter POMS reports in the system? How do we pair a mentor and a mentee together? How do we look up who's due for renewal? All these things that we're responsible for as leadership team members in our chapter, and how to get to those functions in BNI Connect. Some of the functions may not be available to you as your current user, depending on what your current position is in BNI Connect, and also depending on what the permissions and processes are in your particular region. So please keep that in mind as we are going through some of the stuff today. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. This is a live webinar, so if you do have any questions as we're going through any of today's material, please feel free to ask right away. The best way to do that is to type a question into the questions panel. I'll see that pop up on my screen, and I'll be able to answer that as we're going through the content today. We're scheduled for about 30 minutes of content. That being said, I am always happy to stay on these webinars as long as people have questions. So even at the end of the half hour, if you have questions, please do feel free to ask them. I will happily stick around until everybody's questions are answered. Today's webinar is being recorded as well. It will be made available in a couple of different places. The first place is on the support site. So if you click on the question mark up here in the upper right-hand corner of BNI Connect, it will take you over to the support site. On the support site, you can see our list of upcoming webinars. You can see I posted yesterday's webinar as being recorded. And then also going down to the chapter training and documentation, you'll see recorded webinars, and they'll be month by month up there as well, so you can review any of the webinars by month. You'll also find all of our recorded content up on our YouTube channel. So if you go to youtube.com/BNI Connect Global, there are a ton of videos up here. So there's not just the recorded webinars, but there is also other content. We have 3 to 5 minute educational moment videos that you are welcome to use at your chapters during educational moments. We have release announcements and walkthroughs and guides and all sorts of things, and even some special messages directly from Dr. Meisner himself. So please do feel free to check out our YouTube channel. Again, that's youtube.com/BNI Connect Global. So going back to BNI Connect, so let's talk about some of the leadership team functions that we may be doing here in our tenure of BNI. So before we get started, what I'd like to say is that a lot of people seem to get or ask me quite often, well, I'm not really sure where to go to do certain things or where to get certain pieces of information back out of the system. Well, you'll see that here we have network, operations, reports, tools, and admins. And depending on whether or not or what your access levels are, you may see, again, some of these or all of these. But these are the navigation menus that will take you into the different parts of the system. Now, the way I generally think of it is network is for all of the social media functions. So if we go to network, we'll see this is where we can get to the groups, we get to the connections, we get to the testimonials, the picture gallery. These are all things for interacting with other people and networking in BNI Connect. Now, operations, the way I think of operations is where you want to do stuff, where you want to input things into BNI, or where you want to generate an email, or you want to do things that require data input. That's operations. And then you have reports, and reports are getting all the information back out of the system. So if you're looking to find out your chapter statistics or what your roster is, things like that, that's going to be the reports section of the system where you pull that information back out. So what we're going to work on today is things in those operations and in those reports menus. So let's take a look at some of the operations. So I'm going to go to Operations, chapter. And this will show me all of the different chapter level operations that are in the system. So what we can see here is it's broken into a bunch of different categories. We have visitor management, meeting management, membership management, managing goals for your chapter, the mentoring program, creating an email, and managing the news feed for your chapter. So starting with the first one right here, managing visitors. So if we have any visitor hosts that are on the call, or in some chapters it might be the secretary-treasurer that's responsible for adding visitors into the system, this is where we would manage all of the visitors. So there's 4 total options in here. We have add a visitor, manage visitors, register a prospective visitor, and manage registered visitors. Those both are 2 different processes in BNI Connect. So the first 2 options here, adding a visitor and managing a visitor, those have to do with visitors after they have attended a chapter meeting. So for example, if somebody comes to visit a chapter and they didn't pre-register, you would go in and you could add them into your visitor database. Now the second ones here have to do with before a chapter meeting. So prior to a person showing up to a chapter meeting, you can pre-register them for a meeting. Now I'm not going to go too deep into this. I actually do have a webinar dedicated just to the visitor process in BNI Connect. But the important thing is that before a chapter meeting, we can go in and register a prospective visitor. So let's say I'm a chapter member and I invited somebody to come visit. They said, yes, I'd like to come visit. I can go in and register them for a chapter meeting. So I can go in, I can fill out the details. So this person's going to be visiting the Burr chapter up in Antarctica. And they're in the flowers industry, all imported, of course. They're going to be visiting next week's meeting. And I can put in their information. Their company name, I can put in their additional details here, their phone number, and click Submit. Now the great thing about the visitor, pre-registering visitors, is that they are now part of a list of visitors that will be coming to your chapter. They also do get a confirmation email. So Flora would have gotten a confirmation email letting them know, yes, you're registered to visit the meeting. Please make sure to come. Here's the address. Here's where to go to. Make sure you bring plenty of business cards. So that's before a meeting. Now, for a visitor host, what they would do after a meeting is they need to mark the attendance of those visitors. The way they do that is they can go into this Manage Registered Visitors. So in Manage Registered Visitors, I can search by date or by name, or I can just bring up everybody. We'll see all of the visitors that have been registered to attend various meetings. Now for visitors that didn't show up to meetings, so this one back here on December 18th, my good friend Afsad did not go to that meeting, so I can go ahead and remove this visitor if I'd like to by clicking on the Delete option. And let's say that next week goes by and Flora has decided to visit. I can go in and mark Flora as having attended. So I can either change any of the details here, or I can check off the box that says, yes, Flora visited. I can then verify all of this information. I was told that Jeremy was the one that invited them. If I am the one that invited them, I can choose them, or I can choose somebody from the chapter as the person that invited the visitor. Make sure all the dates are correct, the emails are correct, and then click Submit. Now this visitor has been entered into the system. The credit will go in the POMS report, and it's ready to go. Now if there's somebody that has attended the meeting that isn't showing up on this list, you can also manually add them as a visitor by clicking on the Add Visitor button. And the same process applies. You can choose whether or not to add them to the POMS report and fill out the appropriate data. Now, why would we bother adding visitors in? Well, part of the reason is that it's great tracking. It's good for follow-up. It's also great for being able to have that information be put into the POMS report and to be able to follow up with those visitors after, because now we have a database of visitors that have visited the chapter. And of course, if and when those visitors apply to become a member, we'll have all of their information in the system already. Moving on to the next option, and meeting management. And under here is most of the things that the secretary-treasurer and the vice president or membership coordinator of your chapter will be doing on a weekly basis. So the first ones of these has to do with the POMS report, and this is typically a vice president activity. So there's a couple of different things that you do as a vice president. One of those is to enter the weekly POMS. To enter a POMS report, we're just going to click on Enter POMS. Now, interesting thing happens as soon as you go in to enter a POMS report. The first thing that you'll notice is that any visitors that have been input in the system that were marked off to put the credit into the POMS report, you as a vice president will now have the option to accept this visitor or to reject this visitor for POMS credit. And we can see all the information here. I can see that the visitor name was Flora Florist. The person that got the credit for that, or that's going to get the credit for that in their visitor column, will be Harvey Keitel. And we can see that myself, Jeremy, was the one that entered the information into BNI Connect. The date of the visit was 6/18, and I have the option to add this to the POMS. Now, let's say any of this information is incorrect. I can also edit that by clicking on the name of the visitor. And let's say that the visit date was actually this week's meeting on Wednesday instead of last week. I can go in, I can change that. And maybe it wasn't Harvey that invited him. It was actually my friend, Mr. Newman. I can make those changes and submit that visitor. Now I can see this has been corrected, and I can still choose whether or not to add this person to the POMS report. I'm going to go ahead and choose yes. After all the visitors have been accounted for, it will take me into the Enter POMS. So I'm going to choose the meeting date that I'd like to enter a POMS report for, and click on Enter POMS. And what we'll see here is the POMS report for entry. So we can also see that this visitor was automatically entered into the POMS report for us. Now, entering the POMS usually is accumulating all of the paper slips, taking attendance, and marking that data into the system. You can put any notes about your chapter meeting here, and then you can submit this POMS report. Now, one of the great things about the online slips program, now this chapter up here in Antarctica, they're not very good about entering slips into the system. But let's take a look at a live chapter and see what it looks like when somebody is entering slips into BNI Connect. So I'm going to go to my own region, and currently I am a member in BNI. I'm a member of the Wakefield chapter here in Rhode Island. And what I'd like to do is look at the POMS report for yesterday's meeting that we had. Now what we can see here, and this is what happens when your chapter is using online slips, is that the POMS report is already partially filled out for us. So we can see all of the online activity that took place this week. And that means it's that much less work for our vice president to enter the POMS. Now, if I'd like to see exactly what all this activity was, I can always click on the Slips Audit Report. And this will show us all of the weekly activity and who performed that weekly activity as well. And of course, if I was actually filling out this POMS report, I could click Submit. I'm going to go back to the Operations chapter menu. Now, one question I get asked a lot in support is, well, what if I make a mistake on a POMS report? How can I go back and make corrections to that? Well, the way you would do that is we can view past POMS report. So I can go to View POMS Summary. I can go back and choose a date that I'd like to look at the reports. It'll show me all the reports in the system that have been completed. Now for this report on May 7th, this is showing as completed, so I could go in and I could look at this report by clicking on the word completed. And let's say that member B100 up here, they said that they put in a thank you for closed business for $20,000, but that was a typo. It should actually be $2,000. So if I need to edit this, I can go in, I can unlock the POMS report. I can now edit this to take the extra 0 off and resubmit the POMS report. And now that correction will be made and all of our corresponding reports will be corrected as well. Going back to the Operations menu, I'm still under Meeting Management. And the third option here has to do with Secretary Treasurers, and that's viewing and editing the speakers. This is essentially putting your speaker rotation into BNI Connect. So if I click on View Edit Speakers, I can choose a date range here. And I can see that our Secretary Treasurer hasn't been adding the speaker rotation up here in the Burr chapter. I'm going to have a talk with her. So what we're going to want to do is to assign our upcoming speakers for the next, I'd say 4 to 6 weeks. I can click on Assign Speaker. I enter a date that they'll be speaking. I can only choose future dates right now. So on the 18th of June, Art Garfunkel will be speaking, and he will be showcasing his new album. I can click Submit, and now I can see that Art Garfunkel is assigned to speak on the 18th. I can go through now and add additional speakers for upcoming weeks as well. And Marky Mark will be showcasing his new album. Now, one of the benefits of assigning your speakers in BNI Connect, and actually there's 2 major benefits to this, the first of which is that Art Garfunkel will get 2 email reminders about his upcoming speaking engagement at the chapter. So 6 days before the meeting, he will get an email saying, by the way, you're speaking this coming week. Please be prepared to present and bring your door prize. He'll also get another email 3 days before the meeting to remind him a second time. And the same thing with Marky Mark. So it really helps to make sure that the speakers are prepared for their upcoming meetings. The other important part of this is that they will be displayed on the chapter websites. So if I go to our regional website, our Antarctic referrals, and I'm going to go to the chapter website for the Burr chapter. On the bottom of the page here, we can see all of our speakers are now listed. And apologies for the page. This is a test page that I use. But the same is true on my own chapter. So if I go to bnirhodeisland.com and I go to my Wakefield chapter, we can see the next 4 speakers are listed here, the next month's worth of speakers. So we can see who is going to be leading the 10-minute presentation those weeks. This is great for members because it gives you a little bit of extra visibility. Because your name also appears on the site, Google is indexing those bits of information as well, so it helps to increase your online presence a little bit more. If you need to change out a speaker, let's say that Marky Mark isn't going to be able to make it because he's going on world tour that week, we can always remove him as a speaker. And add a different person in. And now Mike will be notified to speak that week. Going back to the operations menu, a couple of other little tips and tricks that I'd like to show you. One of the things that leadership teams often struggle with is communicating with your chapter. A lot of times you need to get an email out to the chapter, and you just really need a quick way to get everybody's email address so that you can get that message out. Now, before BNI Connect, that was kind of a pain in the neck. Most of us, I'm sure this never happened to you, but you would just go back to the most recent email that went out to the group and just hit reply all. Unfortunately, that's not always reliable, as sometimes it has members that may have left the chapter still on that email list, and it might have some people that, it might not have the people that have just joined recently. So in BNI Connect, if you click on Create Email and click on Email My Chapter, this will give you a list of everybody's email address, so you can very quickly highlight everybody and hit Control-C for copy, and then just paste that into your own email program. That way you have full formatting control and can send out an email to all of the people that you need to communicate with. The last thing that I want to show you on the operations menu here is the mentoring program. Now, the mentoring program allows you to pair up two people in the chapter. Usually it's a new member with a veteran member in order to give them some additional training right off the bat. To assign a mentor, we go into the mentoring program and we can click on Assign Mentor Mentee. We choose the date that the mentoring relationship is going to start. So what this really means is this is the date when they'll start receiving weekly emails letting them know what to talk about on a weekly basis. So let's say I'd like them to be receiving the emails every Tuesday, starting next week. I can select the mentor and I can select the mentee and click Submit. And now those two people will start receiving the mentoring campaign emails for the next 8 weeks. If I need to make a change, I can go into View Mentor and Mentee. And I can make any changes, or I could stop the mentor-mentee relationship as well. Okay, the next couple of things I wanted to show you have to do with reports in the system that you might find helpful from a leadership team perspective in BNI Connect. So, of course, one of the main reports that you might be using on even a weekly basis is the chapter roster report. Now, the reason I happen to be a chapter president right now, the reason that I like the chapter roster report a lot is because I can go into this and I can make sure that everybody is assigned correctly for my leadership team. And right now we can see here in Antarctica that we're missing a lot of positions. Tell you what, let me switch over to a live chapter so that these reports are more relevant. But as chapter president, I can see that right now we don't have an education coordinator assigned and we don't have an events coordinator assigned. So I might want to make sure that I get those people on board, and I also let my regional office know to assign those people the roles in BNI Connect. It also gives me a nice quick way to get in touch with any of my chapter members because it lists their phone numbers. I can also see their activity over the last 90 days and see if anybody needs a little bit of help. If you're on the membership committee or you're a secretary-treasurer, one report that you will want to be paying attention to is the membership dues report. The membership dues report will help you know who is upcoming for renewal in your chapter. So I can click Go on this report, and from here I can see all of the list of people. They're going to be listed in chronological order by when they're due to renew. So of course the top 3 people are going to be showing a term plus. So that means when they get out of their role in October or April, whenever that might be, that's the amount of months that they'll have left on their membership before their next renewal. It'll then show all the people that are up bold for the next 2 months. So we know that we should be well into the process of reviewing their memberships and making sure that they have renewal applications. Of course, we can also look further down the list and be looking 3, 4, 5, 6 months out for the people that are upcoming for renewal to offer them some assistance or to be able to do membership reviews. Now, specifically for vice presidents, there's a couple of reports that I think are very handy for you. The absence report will help you to determine if you need to send any of the control letters out. So the absence report, we can choose a date range. Now, most of the time what we're going to want to do is to select the date range of the current 6-month period. As we all know, we get the 3 unexcused absence rule. So if I go back to April 1st through today, this gives me a nice quick list of everybody in the chapter, and I could easily go through and see who has multiple absences, make sure that I've been following through with the control letters, and to see if there's anybody that I need to send additional control letters out to. So I can see especially for the red flags of having 2, 3, or even more absences. Now, to go along with that report, if you've never scrolled down a little bit, there's another great report in here for you vice presidents, and that is the POMS attendance report. Now, the POMS attendance report is just like the absence report, but I like to say it's kind of like the absence report on steroids, because it really shows you some additional information, not just about the number of absences, but the pattern of absences. And it's a similar report in that it lists all the members here, but here it shows you week by week. So you can see, I can see if people have missed multiple weeks in a row, which is a real great indicator as a chapter leadership team person, whether or not somebody might be struggling with BNI and somebody that we might be able to reach out to help out. Now, for you chapter presidents out there, a great idea is to reach out to follow up with visitors before they attend your meeting. And if your members are registering their visitors ahead of time or your visitors are registering themselves, there's a great report here, the visitor registration report, which will show you all of the visitors that are registered for upcoming meetings. So I can go through this report. And unfortunately, in this chapter, there aren't any registered, but you could follow through with anybody that is registered for an upcoming meeting. And finally, the one other report that I wanted to show everybody, we are getting right at the bottom of the hour here, but the personal POMS report. A lot of times when we do have to do member reviews, the regular POMS report is great, but it has everybody's information on it. We may need to just review one particular member. So the personal POMS report, you can run this report for anybody in your chapter. So either myself reviewing my own membership, or if I'm on the membership committee and I need to review somebody in particular, I can pull their name from the list, choose a length of time, And what this does is it just pulls out their information from each of the weekly POMS reports. So I can track all of their history week by week. It also gives me a summary of their attendance, any members that they sponsored during that time frame, and any training that they've attended. All right, so we are at the bottom of the hour. For those of you that do need to leave the webinar right away, I'd like to thank you all for being here. I hope you learned something new today. For those of you that have any questions, I do like to open it up for any questions now, either on stuff that you've seen today or anything at all that you might have questions about in BNI Connect. I would be absolutely thrilled to answer those questions at this time. While you're thinking up any questions, just a couple of reminders. Again, this webinar today is being recorded. It will be made available at youtube.com/BNI Connect Global, as well as on the support site. You can get there by clicking on this question mark in BNI Connect. All right, so do we have any questions? Any questions at all? All right, Mark says, I have an issue with the email system. What kind of issue are you having, Mark? I'd love to take a look at that. Okay, so when you use the email chapter function, what's happening? So if I go to Operations Chapter, and I go to Create Email and email my chapter. So this should show you all of the email addresses. And yes, you do. You get this. You can't compose the email here. All this does is give you an active list that you can highlight these. Right-click and copy and right-click and paste into your own email program. So if you're using Outlook, I do recommend putting them in the BCC field, or if you're using Gmail or something like that. A couple of reasons for this. A, it helps to make sure that you're comfortable using your own email program. And you say it doesn't always work in other programs as they recognize it as spam. Now, one of the reasons that we did do it this way is because your email is actually less likely to be seen as spam than if it was coming from the BNI Connect servers. But yes, I do understand that it might come through as spam in some systems. So it looks a little less professional. So I think that's a good idea. Mark says maybe we could get an email template that we can use in our own systems. One of the great things about BNI Connect is it is a collaborative experience. We do love hearing suggestions, and many of those suggestions have been put into functionality within BNI Connect. Let me show you guys how to make a suggestion in BNI Connect. So if you click on this question mark, it'll bring you over to the support desk. Now, if I scroll down to the public forums here, you'll see that there is a suggestions and enhancement requests. And what would be awesome, Mark, is if you could go there and suggest an idea and just put this idea into the forum. These are reviewed on a weekly basis, and we go through and, again, they get presented. We do have a management board that makes all the decisions, and they decide what goes in based on budget and time frame and other priorities that are happening. So, but thank you so much for putting that in there. Nancy says, where can you find CEU values for webinars and podcasts and advanced MSPs, etc.? So the official list is, if I go back to the home screen and I just go in, excuse me, and submit a CEU slip, this is actually the official form for BNI. So you'll see that, for a BNI CD or SuccessNet, it's 1 credit. For a podcast or a webinar, that's 1 credit. A member success program, that would be 2 credits. Leadership team training, 3 credits. Any advanced training, so that's where the advanced MSP might come in, 4 credits. Other workshops and BNI books by Dr. Meisner, those are 5 credits. So this is the official form. Now, if you have something that's not listed on here, what I would say is that most of these, generally speaking, roughly equate to the amount of time. So 1 credit is approximately 1 hour. You know, how long does it take? Most of the CDs are 1 hour in length. Most of the podcasts are 10 to 12 minutes. So 5 podcasts is roughly 1 hour. So that's why it's 1 credit. Carrie says, which training would we put input for today? And again, I would do the BNI webinar. So I would put in 1 credit here. Now there's also, again, going back to the help site here. Whoops. Let me go over to the help site. If you do a search for SLIPS program, there is an article in here called the SLIPS program overview. And this actually shows you all of the, let me switch that back to English. This actually shows you all of the different meanings behind the slips and the calculations and what the different slips look like, what they mean, how to calculate, thank you for closed business and things like that. So I do recommend that you have a glance at this article. I'll tell you, I'm going to put this up in the chat window for you guys if you'd like to grab that, that link. Does that answer your question, Nancy and Carrie? So Steve asks, as a VP, how do I find out who submitted the thank you for closed business with the value from the referrals received? Now, the short answer to your question is that you can't. So one of the things about the thank you for closed business, and you can see this on the slip itself, is that even on the paper slip, the original paper slip, let me see if I can zoom in here, you'll notice on the thank you slip, there is no place on this slip anywhere to input who received the money, only who generated the money. And this is done intentionally. A, it helps us focus on who is generating the most money for BNI, not who's making the most money in BNI. But just as important, a lot of professions would not be able to report their thank you for closed business if we had both names on the slip. So whether it's an online slip, the slip that you enter through BNI Connect, or whether it's a paper slip, only the person that generated the revenue is recognized. The person that received the revenue is not recognized. So does that answer your question, Steve? And you'll see that if I go back to the POMS summary report. And I'm going to go pick a report here. And I look at the SLIPS audit report. We can see here that thank you for closed business. We can see who generated, but we cannot see here who received the money. So there's no way to tell who received the money, only the people that generated the money. And again, that is done intentionally, and it's to maintain the anonymity of the person that received it. So, all right, what other questions? Again, I am happy to stay on the call as long as people have questions. All right, if there's no additional questions, what I'm going to do is to thank everybody for being here today and spending a little while with me. If you found this webinar useful today, if you learned some new pieces of information, we do have a whole series of webinars on a monthly basis. Again, if you go back to that question mark or you go to your regional website, you'll see all of the upcoming webinars. So our very next webinar, which is this coming Monday, is another leadership team webinar, and that one is going to be how to use the goals program in BNI Connect for your leadership team, how to input them, how to track your goals throughout the year. We're going to be talking about that on Monday. And then if you ever wanted to learn all about the online slips, that one is going to be on Wednesday next week. So a good referral for me is to please promote these webinars to let your other chapter members know about them, and to ask them to please attend. So again, thank you all for being here today, and I look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Have a great day, everyone, and happy connecting.